The antiseptic smell hit me first, that unmistakable hospital scent that somehow manages to mask and amplify death at the same time. My fingers trembled against the thin cotton blanket as another contraction rippled through me, leaving me gasping. The fluorescent lights above buzzed incessantly, a monotonous drone that matched the beeping of monitors surrounding my bed. "Just breathe, Elena," the nurse said mechanically, not bothering to look up from her clipboard. I was just another single mother to her. Another statistic. Another burden on the system. I closed my eyes, trying to focus on anything but the pain and the crushing loneliness. Marco had disappeared the moment I'd told him about the pregnancy, vanishing like smoke, leaving nothing but empty promises and a hollowed-out apartment. 7 months of silence. No calls, no texts. Nothing but the growing life inside me as evidence he'd ever existed at all. The contraction peaked, and I bit down on my lip until I tasted blood. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me break. "We need your emergency contact information," another nurse said, materializing beside me with yet another form. Her scrubs were decorated with cartoon animals, an attempt at cheerfulness that felt like mockery in this sterile room. "There's no one," I whispered, the words scraping my throat. "Just put me down." She frowned, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "Hospital policy requires at least one emergency contact, especially for delivery. Is there anyone at all?" The truth stung worse than the pain radiating through my body. 26 years old, and not a single person in the world I could call. My parents were long gone. Mom to cancer when I was 19, Dad to the bottle shortly after. No siblings. Friends had drifted away during my relationship with Marco, his jealousy slowly severing each connection until I was floating, untethered, in his orbit alone. "The baby's father?" she pressed. I laughed then, a hollow sound that morphed into a groan as another contraction began building. "Good luck finding him." She pursed her lips, disapproval etched in the lines around her mouth. "We'll need his information for the birth certificate, Ms. Russo." "Marco Vittori," I said through gritted teeth. "That's all I know. It wasn't serious." The lie tasted bitter. To me, it had been everything. Until it wasn't. The nurse scribbled something down. "Any idea where he might be?" I shook my head, sweat-dampened hair sticking to my forehead. "He worked for some import company. Said his boss was demanding." Another lie. I'd seen the tattoos Marco tried to hide, noticed the way he'd take calls at odd hours, stepping outside regardless of weather or time. I wasn't stupid, but I'd been lonely, and he'd been beautiful, and sometimes that's all it takes for someone like me to ignore the warning signs. When the next contraction hit, something felt different. The pressure intensified, and I heard myself cry out. "She's ready," the first nurse called out. "Get Dr. Moretti." The next hours blurred into a haze of pain, clinical instructions, and my own desperate prayers to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. When my daughter finally arrived, her angry cries filling the delivery room, the emptiness inside me was suddenly replaced by something I couldn't name, something fierce and terrifying in its intensity. "She's perfect," the doctor said, placing her tiny, squirming body on my chest. I looked down at her, this small, red-faced stranger with a shock of dark hair, and felt my world tilt and resettle on a new axis. "Sophia," I whispered, the name I'd chosen months ago finally finding its owner. After they took her to be cleaned and measured, I drifted in and out of consciousness, the exhaustion of 26 hours of labor finally claiming me. I dreamed of Marco, not as he was at the end, cold and distant, but as he'd been in the beginning, laughing as we raced through summer rain to reach the shelter of a cafe awning. I woke to raised voices in the corridor outside my room. "Sir, visiting hours don't begin until... move." That single word, delivered with quiet authority, sent a chill down my spine even before I recognized the voice. It couldn't be. "Sir, you can't just... I received a call saying I'm listed as the father. Now either you direct me to Elena Russo's room, or I start opening doors myself." My heart stuttered painfully in my chest. That voice, low, measured, with the faintest trace of an accent, belonged to Dante Ricci. Not Marco. Dante. I'd only met him once, at a restaurant opening where I'd been working as a waitress. Marco had frozen when he'd walked in, surrounded by men in expensive suits, their vigilant eyes constantly scanning the room. "That's him," Marco had whispered, a mixture of fear and reverence in his voice. "The boss." Dante Ricci had sat at the best table, barely glancing at the menu before ordering in perfect, formal Italian. Throughout the night, people had approached his table, some nervous, others attempting casual confidence, and each time, they'd left looking either relieved or devastated. I'd been assigned to his section, and despite my best efforts to remain professional, I'd felt his dark eyes following me throughout the evening. As I'd served his espresso, he looked up at me, really looked, for the first time. "What's your name?" he'd asked, his voice like aged whiskey, smooth with a burning finish. "Elena," I'd answered, focusing on the cup to keep my hands from shaking. "Elena," he'd repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "You're new here." It wasn't a question, but I'd answered anyway. "Yes, sir. First week." His lips had curved slightly. "You're doing well." Then his eyes had hardened as he'd looked past me. "Isn't she, Marco?" I'd turned to find Marco standing frozen near the service station, face drained of color. "Yes, sir. She is." That night, Marco had been rougher than usual, leaving bruises on my hips and arms. He never explained the connection between him and Dante Ricci, and I never asked. Some questions were safer, left unasked. Now, Dante Ricci was outside my hospital room, claiming to be my daughter's father. The door swung open, and he filled the frame, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. His dark hair was cropped short at the sides but longer on top, and a neatly trimmed beard accentuated his sharp jawline. He looked exactly as I remembered, except for the dangerous glint in his eyes. Behind him stood 2 men, one lean and watchful, the other built like a concrete wall. Security. Of course, Dante's gaze swept the room before landing on me, propped up against hospital pillows, probably looking like death warmed over. "Leave us," he said quietly, not turning around. The men disappeared, the door clicking shut behind them. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I couldn't read his expression. It was carefully, deliberately blank, giving away nothing. But there was tension in his shoulders, in the controlled way he breathed. "There's been a mistake," I finally said, my voice hoarse. "I don't know why they called you." He moved further into the room, each step measured and deliberate. "No mistake," I checked. Fear coiled in my stomach. "That's impossible." "Is it?" He reached into his suit jacket, removing a folded document. "According to this preliminary birth certificate, I'm listed as the father of Sofia Russo, born at 3:47 this morning." He glanced at his watch. "Approximately 5 hours ago." My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. "I never put your name down. I told them Marco Vittori worked for me." He cut in, his voice hardening on Marco's name. "Until he disappeared 7 months ago, after stealing from me." The pieces suddenly clicked into horrible place. Marco hadn't just left me, he'd been running from Dante Ricci. And somehow, in his desperation, he'd dragged me into whatever he'd done. "I don't know anything about that," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "We broke up. He left." Dante approached the bed, his movements reminiscent of a predator, unhurried, yet intentional. He stopped at the foot, studying me with those impenetrable dark eyes. Marco was many things: a thief, a liar, a coward, but apparently he was smart enough to know what would happen if I found him. He set the document on the bed near my feet. So he did the one thing that might give him leverage. He made sure I'd be contacted when his child was born. "She's not your child," I said, anger momentarily overpowering fear. "And I don't know what Marco did, but it has nothing to do with me or my daughter." Something flickered in Dante's eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or appreciation for my defiance. "The birth certificate says otherwise, Elena." The way he said my name sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "That can be changed. It's just paper." He smiled then, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "In my experience, nothing is ever just anything." He moved to the side of the bed, close enough that I could smell his cologne. something expensive and subtle, sandalwood and amber. Where is Marco? I don't know, I answered truthfully. I haven't seen or heard from him since I told him about the pregnancy. He cleaned out our apartment while I was at work and disappeared. Dante studied me, and I had the unsettling feeling he was cataloging every micro-expression, every blink, every shallow breath, looking for lies. You expect me to believe he never contacted you? Never told you what he did? I met his gaze directly. I don't care what you believe. It's the truth. Before he could respond, the door opened, and a nurse entered, pushing a small transparent bassinet. Time for feeding, Mom, she said cheerfully, then froze when she noticed Dante. Oh, you must be the father. Congratulations. Her eyes darted between us, clearly sensing the tension but professional enough not to comment. Dante turned toward the bassinet, and I saw his expression change. So subtly I might have imagined it, as he looked at Sophia for the first time. Something softened in his face, just for a moment, before the mask slipped back into place. I'll leave you three alone, the nurse said, transferring Sophia to my arms before hurrying out, the door closing with a soft click behind her. Sophia squirmed against me, her tiny face scrunching up as she began to fuss. Instinctively, I adjusted her, cradling her head as I tried to position her to feed. The hospital gown was awkward, and my hands were trembling. Here, Dante said unexpectedly, reaching for a pillow at the foot of the bed. He placed it under my elbow, providing support. When I looked up in surprise, his face was unreadable again. Sophia latched on, and the room fell silent except for her soft suckling sounds. I was acutely aware of Dante watching us, his presence filling the small room like smoke, impossible to ignore. She has your coloring, he finally said, his voice lower than before. And Marco's eyes, I replied without thinking, then immediately regretted mentioning his name again. Dante's jaw tightened visibly. For your sake. I hope that's all she inherited from him. The implied threat hung in the air between us. I pulled Sophia closer protectively, wincing slightly at the movement. What do you want? I asked, exhaustion suddenly crashing over me. Why are you really here? He didn't answer immediately, instead moving to the window to look out at the gray morning sky. When he finally spoke, his back was still to me. Marco took something that belongs to me. Something irreplaceable. He turned, his gaze falling on Sophia, and now, it seems, he's given me something in return. My blood ran cold. She's not a thing. She's not something to be traded or used as leverage. No, he agreed, surprising me. She's not. But according to every legal document that currently exists, she is my daughter. He stepped closer again. And I protect what's mine, Elena. Always. The possessiveness in his voice should have repulsed me. Instead, it sent a treacherous warmth spreading through my chest. The dangerous allure of protection after months of vulnerability. This is insane, I whispered, more to myself than to him. You can't seriously intend to... What, claim a child that isn't yours? Can't I? His smile was razor-sharp. I've already made arrangements for private rooms for both of you. When you're discharged, a car will be waiting. Panic clawed at my throat. I'm not going anywhere with you. Consider your options carefully, Elena, he said, his tone maddeningly reasonable. You have no home. The lease on Marco's apartment expired months ago. No savings. I checked your accounts. No family, a newborn daughter. And now, a connection to me that Marco ensured would be documented and official. He leaned closer. Do you really think you'd be safer on your own? The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on getting through the pregnancy day by day that I hadn't fully confronted the reality of what came after. My meager savings had been depleted by medical bills, not covered by my inadequate insurance. I'd been staying with a coworker, sleeping on her couch, but that was temporary. Sophia had fallen asleep at my breast, her tiny face peaceful, unaware of the dangerous game being played around her. Why would you want this? I asked, genuine confusion mixing with fear. She's not your responsibility. Something dark and unfathomable passed behind his eyes. Perhaps I'm curious to see what Marco thought was so valuable he'd risk using my name. He reached out, one finger gently touching Sophia's tiny fist where it rested against my skin. Or Perhaps I simply don't appreciate being manipulated, and this is the most effective way to draw him out. I pulled back instinctively, and his eyes narrowed at the movement. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide," he said, straightening and adjusting his cuffs. "Either way, I'll be back." He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. "For what it's worth, Elena, I'm sorry you've been caught in the middle of this. It was never about you." The door closed behind him with a quiet finality, leaving me alone with my daughter and an impossible choice. Outside my window, rain began to fall, droplets racing down the glass like tears. I looked down at Sophia, sleeping peacefully against me, unaware that in her first hours of life, she had already become a pawn in a game I didn't understand. What I did understand was the look in Dante Ricci's eyes when he'd seen her, that momentary softening, that flicker of something almost human. And I understood with terrifying clarity that I would do anything, make any deal, accept any terms, to keep my daughter safe, even if it meant belonging to the devil himself. Morning arrived with harsh clarity, sunlight streaming through the blinds I'd forgotten to close. Sophia stirred against my chest where she'd slept after her dawn feeding, her tiny breaths warm against my skin. I hadn't slept, couldn't sleep, with Dante Ricci's ultimatum hovering over me like a guillotine blade. A soft knock preceded the door opening, revealing not a nurse but a woman in a tailored charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, reminded me of Dante's in their calculation. "Ms. Russo," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "I'm Alessandra Vega, Mr. Ricci's personal assistant." Of course he hadn't come himself. Men like Dante Ricci delegated ultimatums. "He sent you to collect my answer," I said flatly, adjusting Sophia as she began to fuss. Alessandra's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Ricci sent me to facilitate your transfer to private accommodations, regardless of your decision." She gestured to a sleek leather overnight bag she carried. "I've brought some essentials for you and the baby." "And if I refuse to go?" Her perfectly arched eyebrow rose slightly. "Mr. Ricci suggested I remind you that you currently have nowhere else to go, and that the hospital is discharging you today." She checked her watch. "In approximately 3 hours." My stomach twisted. She was right. The doctor had signed my discharge papers that morning. My co-worker's couch was no longer available. She'd texted last night that her boyfriend was moving in sooner than expected. "This is kidnapping," I said, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Is it?" Alessandra set the bag down and removed a manila folder. "These are copies of Sophia's birth certificate, listing Mr. Ricci as the father. Also included is temporary guardianship paperwork, which only requires your signature." She placed them on the bedside table. "Mr. Ricci is offering you safe accommodation, medical care, and financial support for both you and your daughter. He's not forcing you to accompany him, merely making it the most logical choice." The calm rationality in her voice made the situation even more surreal, as if being claimed by a mafia boss was simply a business arrangement. "Why is he doing this?" I asked, desperate for something to make sense. "We both know Sophia isn't his." Something flickered across Alessandra's face, not quite sympathy, but a momentary crack in her professional veneer. "Mr. Ricci has his reasons. It's not my place to question them." Sophia began to cry in earnest now, her tiny face reddening. I rocked her automatically, the movement already becoming instinctive after just one day. "The private suite has a full nursery attached," Alessandra continued. "Mr. Ricci has arranged for a pediatrician to be on call and a postnatal nurse to assist you." She paused, watching me soothe Sophia. "The alternative is leaving here alone with a newborn, and nowhere to go." Put that way, there wasn't really a choice at all. I thought of the meager $73 in my checking account, the maxed-out credit card, the unpaid medical bills already piling up. I thought of shelters and welfare offices, of struggling alone through sleepless nights with a colicky baby. I thought of Marco, who had used me as a shield against whatever vengeance Dante sought. "Fine," I said, the word tasting like surrender. "I'll go." Alessandra nodded, unsurprised. A wise decision. She moved toward the door. I'll inform the medical team and complete your discharge paperwork. Be ready in 1 hour. After she left, I pressed my lips to Sophia's forehead, breathing in her newborn scent. I'm sorry, I whispered against her skin. I'm sorry I couldn't give you something better than this. The private suite turned out to be an entire wing of an exclusive medical facility outside the city. The ambulance transfer, another of Dante's arrangements, delivered us to a discreet side entrance, where Alessandra waited alongside a medical team. Mr. Ricci wanted to ensure you had proper care during your recovery, she explained as they wheeled me, with Sophia in my arms, through corridors that looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. He's arranged for Dr. Bennett to oversee both your care and Sophia's. The suite itself was larger than my last apartment, with a spacious bedroom featuring a hospital-grade bed, an adjoining sitting room with plush furniture, and a fully equipped nursery decorated in soft creams and pale greens. The windows overlooked manicured gardens, currently glistening with morning dew. Your things have been collected from your previous accommodation, Alessandra said, gesturing to my battered suitcase and few belongings, looking pathetically out of place against the luxury surroundings. Mr. Ricci took the liberty of supplementing your wardrobe and the baby's essentials. I glanced toward the massive walk-in closet, its doors ajar to reveal clothing with tags still attached. How generous, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Mr. Ricci will visit this evening, Alessandra continued, ignoring my tone. He suggests you rest until then. The staff has been instructed to provide anything you need. She handed me a cell phone. This is for you. It has my number programmed in, as well as direct lines to the medical staff and security. Security. The word hung in the air between us, its dual meaning unmistakable. Protection and surveillance. Am I a prisoner here? I asked directly, shifting Sophia to my shoulder. Alessandra's expression remained carefully neutral. You're a guest, Ms. Russo, a guest under Mr. Ricci's protection. She moved toward the door. I suggest you don't test the boundaries of that protection. After she left, a nurse helped me settle in, demonstrating the features of the suite and checking Sophia's vitals. When we were finally alone, I sank onto the edge of the obscenely comfortable bed, Sophia asleep in the bassinet beside me. What have we gotten ourselves into? I whispered. The hours passed in a haze of feeding, changing, and brief, fitful naps. Despite the luxury surrounding me, I couldn't relax, constantly aware of the cameras I'd spotted in the corners of each room, except, thankfully, the bathroom and bedroom. As twilight descended, bathing the room in golden light, I heard voices in the corridor outside. One female, likely Alessandra, and one unmistakably male. My pulse quickened as the door opened, revealing Dante Ricci. He'd exchanged yesterday's formal suit for dark trousers and a charcoal sweater that did nothing to diminish his commanding presence. His eyes swept the room before settling on me, sitting in the nursery rocker with Sophia cradled against my chest. Leave us, he said to Alessandra, without looking at her. The door closed silently behind him. For a moment, he simply stood there, watching us with an unreadable expression. Then he moved forward, his steps soundless on the plush carpet. How are you feeling? He asked, his voice lower than I remembered. Physically or emotionally, I responded, the words sharper than intended. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Both. I shifted Sophia to my other arm, buying time. Physically, like I just pushed a human being out of my body. Emotionally, like I've been maneuvered into a corner by someone I barely know. Fair enough, he conceded, surprising me. He moved closer, his gaze dropping to Sophia. May I? The request was unexpected, as was the hesitation in his voice. I found myself nodding, carefully transferring my daughter into his arms. Dante Ricci, the man who reportedly commanded the city's largest criminal organization, held Sophia with practiced ease, supporting her head perfectly. The contrast of her tiny form against his broad chest created an image of vulnerability and strength that made my heart twist painfully. She's beautiful, he said quietly, one finger gently tracing the curve of her cheek. Perfect. Something in his expression, a softness I hadn't seen before, gave me courage. Why am I here, Dante? Really? His eyes lifted to mine, dark and fathomless, because Marco Vittori thought he could use an innocent child to manipulate me. His gaze returned to Sophia, and because I need to understand why. What did he take from you? I asked. What was worth all this? The question seemed to darken the very air around him. Something irreplaceable. He carefully placed Sophia in her bassinet, his movements gentle despite the tension radiating from him. Family heirloom, a ring that belonged to my mother. The simple explanation felt incomplete, insufficient to explain the elaborate scenario he'd constructed. A ring? All this for a ring? His jaw tightened. Not just any ring, the last thing she gave me before she died. He turned away, moving to the window. It was a message. Taking that specific item. Marco worked for me for 3 years. He knew what it meant. I watched his reflection in the glass, the controlled anger in his posture. I'm sorry, I said softly. About your mother's ring. He glanced back at me, surprise flickering across his features. You believe me? It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I believe someone hurt you, and you're trying to make it right in the only way you know how. I gestured around the room, even if your methods are extreme. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Extreme is subjective. He turned fully to face me. I've had men searching for Marco for 7 months. Nothing. Then suddenly my name appears on a birth certificate. His eyes narrowed slightly. A message, don't you think? The implication sent a chill down my spine. You think I'm involved, that I'm helping him. Are you? No, I said firmly. Marco abandoned me the day I told him I was pregnant. Emptied our joint account. Took everything of value from our apartment. I haven't heard from him since. The memory still stung. The humiliation of returning to an empty apartment. The panic of realizing I had been left with nothing. If I knew where he was, I'd tell you. Not for you. For me. For what he did to me. Dante studied me, his gaze almost physical in its intensity. Then he nodded once, decision made. I believe you. Relief washed through me, though I wasn't entirely sure why his belief mattered. So what now? I asked. You keep us here indefinitely, waiting for Marco to make contact? You'll stay under my protection until the situation is resolved, he said, the finality in his tone brooking no argument. In the meantime, you'll want for nothing, neither will Sophia. And if Marco never comes back, something dangerous flashed in his eyes. He will. Men like Marco always make the same mistake. They think they're smarter than they are. He moved closer again, close enough that I could smell his cologne. But to answer your question, if he doesn't return, arrangements will be made for your future security. Our future cage, you mean, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. His expression hardened. You misunderstand me, Elena. I'm not your enemy. You're not my friend either. No, he agreed, his voice lowering. I'm not. The weight of his gaze made my skin prickle with awareness. There was something undeniably magnetic about him, a gravity that pulled at me despite every logical warning bell clanging in my mind. Sophia stirred in her bassinet, breaking the tension. Dante stepped back, creating distance between us. Rest, he said, moving toward the door. We'll speak again tomorrow. As he reached for the handle, I found my voice again. The birth certificate. Will you have it corrected? He paused, looking back at me with an unreadable expression. No, he said simply. For now, it serves a purpose. His eyes drifted to Sophia's sleeping form. And perhaps in time, it will become truth enough. The door closed behind him, leaving me with the unsettling feeling that I'd just agreed to something far more complicated than temporary protection. Days bled into weeks with unsettling ease. The luxury of my gilded cage made it dangerously simple to forget I wasn't free. Each morning, I woke to fresh flowers on the breakfast table, a staff that anticipated my every need, and Sophia's nursery constantly replenished with impossibly tiny designer clothes. After 2 weeks, we were moved from the medical facility to a secluded estate on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling property surrounded by manicured gardens and an imposing security perimeter. My suite occupied the east wing, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private garden. The rooms were elegant without being ostentatious, clearly designed for comfort rather than show. Sophia had her own nursery, a magical space painted with delicate woodland scenes that seemed to shift in the changing light. Dante visited daily, always arriving at precisely 6 o'clock. Always alone. Our interactions followed a strange, unspoken choreography. He would inquire about our needs, hold Sophia with that same surprising gentleness, and occasionally share a meal with me. He never stayed longer than an hour, and he never spoke of Marco or the circumstances that had brought us there, until tonight. "She's growing quickly," Dante observed, watching as I settled Sophia after her evening feeding. 4 weeks old now. She was already showing signs of personality. Stubborn and vocal, with a gaze that seemed too aware for her age. "The pediatrician says she's ahead on her development charts," I replied, unable to keep the pride from my voice. Despite everything, Sophia was thriving, and she had become my entire world. She's strong, like her mother. The unexpected compliment caught me off guard. I looked up to find Dante watching me, not Sophia, his dark eyes intent in a way that made my pulse quicken. "Not strong enough," I said quietly, tucking the blanket around Sophia's sleeping form. "Strong enough would have been seeing through Marco from the beginning." Dante moved closer, his proximity sending a familiar warmth spreading through my chest. "Some men excel at deception, Elena. Don't blame yourself for believing what he wanted you to see. Is that what you excel at?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "Making people see what you want them to see?" Instead of anger, his lips curved into that rare, genuine smile that transformed his features. "No, I excel at seeing people as they truly are." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. "It's both a gift and a curse." The touch, brief as it was, burned like a brand. I stepped back, disturbed by my own reaction. 4 weeks of proximity had created a dangerous familiarity, a false sense of intimacy that threatened my already fragile boundaries. "And what do you see when you look at me?" I asked, desperate to break the tension. His expression turned serious. "Someone who has been underestimated her entire life, someone stronger than she believes, someone worthy of more than what she's been given." He paused, his gaze dropping to Sophia. "Someone I'm beginning to care for more than I should." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Before I could respond, his phone vibrated. He checked it, his expression hardening instantly. "We need to talk," he said, all warmth vanishing from his voice. "My office, 10 minutes." He left without another word, the door closing with quiet finality behind him. I stood frozen, my mind racing with possibilities. None of them good. Had Marco been found? Was our arrangement about to end? After putting Sophia down for her nap, I changed quickly from my loungewear into a simple dress, ran a brush through my hair, and made my way to Dante's office. I'd never been invited there before. Located in the West Wing, it was part of the house that remained off-limits to me, a reminder of the invisible boundaries that governed my new existence. 2 men stood guard outside the heavy wooden doors. They nodded at my approach, one of them knocking before opening the door for me. Dante's office matched the man, imposing, elegant, and impenetrable. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, interspersed with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. A massive desk dominated the space, behind which Dante stood reviewing documents spread before him. He wasn't alone. Alessandra was there, along with a man I recognized as Carlo, Dante's head of security. Their conversation halted abruptly at my entrance. "Leave us," Dante said, his eyes meeting mine across the room. Alessandra and Carlo exited silently, closing the door behind them. "What's happened?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Dante gestured to one of the chairs across from his desk. "Sit." I remained standing. "Tell me what's going on." His jaw tightened at my defiance, but something like approval flickered in his eyes. "Marco has made contact." The words hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, hearing his name spoken aloud, knowing he was out there, aware of our situation, made the room tilt momentarily. "What does he want?" I managed, gripping the back of the chair to steady myself. "What all men like him want: money." Dante moved around the desk, lessening the distance between us. And you? Me? You and Sophia, his insurance policy. Dante's expression darkened. He claims he'll return what he stole in exchange for a payment and your freedom. A bitter laugh escaped me. My freedom. As if I'm his to reclaim. You're not his, Dante said, his voice dropping dangerously. You were never his. The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened me. Instead, it sent a treacherous heat coursing through my veins. 4 weeks of careful distance, of watching him with Sophia, of late-night conversations that gradually revealed pieces of the man beneath the power. It had all worn away at my defenses. What are you going to do? I asked, fighting to focus on the immediate danger rather than my conflicted emotions. Spring the trap. Dante moved to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He offered one to me. He wants a meeting. Just the 2 of us. At a location of his choosing, I accepted the glass, needing something to hold on to. It's a setup. Of course it is. He took a sip, watching me over the rim of his glass, but it's also an opportunity to get your mother's ring back. Something flashed across his face. Surprise, perhaps, that I remembered that detail. Yes. And to end this, the implication in those 4 words chilled me. You're going to kill him. It wasn't a question, but Dante answered anyway. I'm going to do what's necessary to ensure the safety of what's mine. His eyes held mine, and despite what you might think of me, Elena, I don't make that claim lightly. I drained my glass, welcoming the burn of expensive whiskey down my throat. When? Tomorrow night. Fear gripped me. Not for Marco, whose fate I found I cared little about, but for Dante. The realization was startling in its clarity. Somewhere in the past 4 weeks, my captor had become something else. Something I wasn't ready to name. It could be a trap, I said, setting my glass down on his desk with a sharp click. He could be working with someone, planning to ambush you. A cold smile touched Dante's lips. Let him try. And if something happens to you, what happens to us? The question revealed more than I intended, exposing the dependency that had formed like invisible chains. Dante stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Nothing will happen to me. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw. But your concern is noted. It's not concern, I lied, hating the breathless quality of my voice. It's self-preservation. Is it? His thumb brushed across my lower lip, the touch sending electricity sparking through me. Tell me something, Elena. In these weeks you've been here, have you felt unsafe, threatened, mistreated in any way? The truth was shameful in its simplicity. No. No, he repeated, satisfaction evident in his tone. Because despite what brought you here, your well-being, and Sophia's, has always been my priority. His hand dropped to my shoulder, then slid down my arm, leaving heat in its wake. Whatever Marco might have told you about me, know this. I protect what's mine, always. I'm not yours, I whispered, the words lacking conviction even to my own ears. His eyes darkened. Aren't you? Before I could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. Dante stepped back, the moment shattering like glass. Enter, he called, his voice betraying none of the tension crackling between us. Carlo appeared in the doorway. Sir, the arrangements are complete. We're ready when you are. Dante nodded. Good. We move at midnight tomorrow. After Carlo left, I found my voice again. What happens after? If Marco is no longer a threat, Dante turned to me, his expression unreadable. That depends on you. On me? On what you want. He moved to the window, looking out at the gathering darkness. The birth certificate can be amended. You'll be provided for, of course. A home, financial security, whatever you need to build a life for yourself and Sophia. He paused. Or you can stay. The simplicity of the choice belied its complexity. Stay as what? Your prisoner? Your charity case? As mine, he said quietly, turning to face me. In every way. The implication stole my breath. You can't be serious. I'm always serious, Elena, especially about this. He closed the distance between us again. These weeks have shown me something I didn't expect to find, something I didn't know I wanted until you appeared in my life. A ready-made family? I asked bitterly. A woman and child you can control. Anger flashed in his eyes, quickly controlled. Is that what you think this is? That I've kept you in luxury, provided everything you need, respected your boundaries, all so I could control you? I don't know what to think anymore, I admitted, exhaustion suddenly weighing on me. I don't know where the manipulation ends and the truth begins. His expression softened unexpectedly. Then let me make it simple for you. He reached out, his hand cupping my cheek. I want you, Elena. Not because of Marco, not because of circumstances, but because in 4 weeks, you've become essential to me in ways I never anticipated. His thumb brushed away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen, and I hope, you might feel something similar. The vulnerability in his admission, so at odds with the powerful man I'd come to know, cracked something open inside me. Even if I did, I whispered. How could I ever know it was real, that it wasn't just Stockholm Syndrome, or gratitude or fear? Because I'll give you a choice, he said simply. After tomorrow, regardless of the outcome, you'll be free to leave. With my protection and support, but free. His hand dropped from my face, and then, if you choose to return, it will be because you want to. Because this, us, is what you truly desire. The offer stunned me into silence. Freedom, the one thing I'd believed he would never grant, offered freely. Before I could respond, Sophia's cry echoed through the baby monitor I carried. The sound broke the spell between us, pulling me back to reality. I should go to her, I said, taking a step back. Dante nodded, his expression closed once more. Of course. At the door, I paused, looking back at him. Be careful tomorrow. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Always am. As I hurried back to my rooms, Sophia's cries growing more insistent, I realized with startling clarity that I was more afraid of Dante not returning than I was of remaining in his world forever. And that terrified me more than Marco ever could. I didn't sleep that night. Sophia, sensing my anxiety, fussed more than usual, only settling in the early hours of the morning. I paced the nursery with her against my shoulder, whispering reassurances I didn't believe myself. Outside, rain lashed against the windows, the weather reflecting the storm inside me. Dawn brought no clarity. I moved through the day in a daze, mechanically attending to Sophia while my mind raced with possibilities, each darker than the last. Dante was nowhere to be seen. Alessandra informed me he was attending to business when I casually inquired during lunch. By evening, the house had taken on an eerie quietness, the usual staff conspicuously absent. Only Sophia's nursemaid remained, along with 2 security guards stationed outside my suite. The sense of impending danger hung in the air like a gathering storm. I had just put Sophia down for her evening nap when the door to my sitting room opened without a knock. Dante stood in the doorway, dressed entirely in black, tailored trousers, a lightweight sweater that did nothing to conceal the power of his build, and a jacket that hung with suspicious weight on one side. His expression was unreadable, but tension radiated from him in almost visible waves. You're leaving now, I said quietly, moving away from the bassinet to avoid waking Sophia. He nodded once, his dark eyes scanning my face as if committing it to memory. The meeting is set for midnight. Where? Safer if you don't know. He stepped further into the room. I've increased security here. No one enters or leaves until I return. Fear tightened my chest, not for myself, but for him. Dante, don't, he interrupted softly. Whatever you're about to say, don't say it out of fear or uncertainty. I closed my mouth, suddenly unsure of what I had been about to confess. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne mingled with something metallic and dangerous. If this goes sideways, he said, voice low. Alessandra has instructions. You and Sophia will be taken care of. I don't want to be taken care of, I replied, my voice stronger than I expected. I want you to come back. Something softened in his expression, a momentary glimpse of the man beneath the armor he'd been constructing all day. His hand came up to cup my cheek, his touch gentler than it had any right to be. I will, he promised, though we both knew it wasn't entirely his to promise. Before I could respond, He closed the distance between us, his lips capturing mine in a kiss that felt like both a beginning and a potential ending. I responded instantly, my body betraying what my mind had been fighting for weeks. His arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me against him as the kiss deepened, becoming something desperate and hungry and full of unspoken words. When he finally pulled away, his breathing was as ragged as mine. "That," he said, his forehead resting against mine, "is why I'll come back." Then he was gone, leaving only the phantom pressure of his lips and the scent of him lingering in the air. I stood frozen, fingers pressed to my mouth, emotions warring within me. The kiss had shattered the last of my illusions. I had fallen for the man who had claimed me and my daughter as his own. Fallen for a man who was, at this moment, heading into danger because of us. Outside, I heard car engines start, then fade into the distance. The silence that followed was deafening. Hours crept by with excruciating slowness. I fed Sophia, bathed her, sang her to sleep. Normal activities that felt surreal against the backdrop of what was happening beyond these walls. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart stopped. But it was never news, just Alessandra checking in, her messages becoming increasingly terse as midnight approached and passed. At 1:17 a.m., the security system's alarm blared to life, the sudden noise making me jolt. Sophia woke, crying in protest. I scooped her up instinctively, heart pounding as I heard shouting and running footsteps in the corridor outside. My door burst open, revealing Carlo, Dante's head of security. Blood stained his shirt collar, and his expression sent ice through my veins. "We need to move you. Now," he ordered, already crossing to the closet and pulling out a small bag. "What's happened?" I demanded, clutching Sophia tighter as her cries escalated. "Where's Dante?" Carlo didn't look at me as he threw some of my clothes and Sophia's necessities into the bag. "Compromised location. Possible security breach here." He zipped the bag shut with unnecessary force. "We're following protocol. Tell me what happened to Dante," I insisted, not moving despite his obvious urgency. Carlo finally met my gaze, his expression grim. "Ambush. Multiple hostiles." He checked his watch. "Mr. Ricci ordered immediate evacuation of primary assets if communication was lost for more than an hour." Primary assets. The clinical term cut through me like a blade. "Is he dead?" "Unknown," Carlo answered, his professional mask slipping just enough to reveal his own concern. Last communication indicated he was pinned down but operational. Operational. These cold, militaristic terms for the man who had kissed me goodbye hours ago. "I'm not leaving without knowing," I stated firmly, even as fear threatened to choke me. "You don't have a choice, Ms. Russo." Carlo's hand moved to his sidearm, not threatening, but a clear reminder of who was in charge. "Mr. Ricci's standing orders are explicit. You and the child are to be moved to the secondary location immediately." The sound of more footsteps in the hallway prevented further argument. 2 more security men appeared, their expressions equally grim. "Perimeter breach confirmed," one of them reported. "North gate. 2 vehicles." Carlo cursed under his breath. "Move. Now." What followed was a blur of motion. Someone handed me a coat. Someone else took Sophia momentarily while I put it on. Carlo led us not through the main corridor, but through what appeared to be a service passage, dimly lit and narrow. Sophia, somehow sensing the danger, had quieted against my chest, her tiny fingers clutching my shirt. We emerged into the garage beneath the house, where a nondescript SUV with tinted windows idled. Carlo opened the back door, revealing a car seat already installed. "Get in. Secure the child. Say nothing until we're clear," he instructed, scanning the garage with watchful eyes. I complied, hands trembling as I strapped Sophia into the seat. Carlo took the wheel, another security man riding shotgun, weapon drawn and resting on his knee. The garage door opened silently, and we slipped out into the rainy night. Through the rear window, I watched Dante's estate recede into the darkness. My temporary home, my gilded cage, now potentially compromised by unknown enemies. Enemies targeting Dante, and by extension, us. We drove in tense silence, following a convoluted route through the outskirts of the city. Sophia, exhausted by the disruption to her routine, eventually drifted to sleep, unaware of the danger surrounding us. I envied her innocence, her ability to trust that she would be protected. My phone vibrated in my pocket. With shaking fingers, I pulled it out to find a message from an unknown number. Don't trust them. Marco. Ice flooded my veins. I glanced up to find Carlo watching me in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. Problem? He asked, his tone casual despite the tension evident in his shoulders. I swallowed hard, mind racing. If Marco was messaging me, did that mean the meeting with Dante had never happened? Or that it had gone catastrophically wrong? Either way, the warning sent chills down my spine. Just checking the time, I lied, slipping the phone back into my pocket. Carlo held my gaze a moment too long before returning his attention to the road. We'll be at the safe house in 20 minutes. You'll stay there until we receive new orders. New orders. From whom? If Dante was... No. I couldn't even think the word. The city lights fell away as we headed into more rural areas, the road becoming narrower and less maintained. Rain continued to fall, reducing visibility and lending an ominous quality to the night. Occasionally, Carlo would make an abrupt turn or double back, ensuring we weren't being followed. My phone vibrated again. Under the pretense of checking on Sophia, I angled my body away from the front seats and quickly glanced at the screen. They're taking you to him, not away. Get out now. Last chance. A cold certainty settled in my stomach. Something wasn't right. Carlo's evasiveness, the urgency of the evacuation despite no visible threat at the house, the circuitous route, all of it felt wrong. I looked at Sophia, peaceful in her sleep, and knew with absolute clarity that I would do anything to protect her. Even if it meant taking advice from the man who had abandoned us. I need to use the restroom, I said suddenly. Sophia needs changing too. Carlo's eyes flicked to mine in the mirror again. It can wait. It can't, I insisted, injecting desperation into my voice. She has a rash that gets worse if she sits too long in a wet diaper. Please, just a quick stop. He seemed to weigh his options, then nodded curtly. 5 minutes. Next service station. 10 tense minutes later, he pulled into a deserted gas station, its fluorescent lights harsh against the dark countryside surrounding it. Make it quick, he said, as the SUV came to a stop near the restroom entrance. Anton will accompany you. The security man from the passenger seat exited, opening my door with cold efficiency. I unstrapped Sophia, gathered her diaper bag, and stepped into the rain, heart pounding so loudly I was certain they could hear it. Anton positioned himself outside the restroom door, his back to me as he scanned the perimeter. 3 minutes, he called as the door swung shut behind me. The restroom was dirty but mercifully empty. I laid Sophia on the changing table, my mind racing. There had to be another way out. A window, perhaps. The sound of screeching tires and shouting outside made me freeze. Gunshots followed, 3 in rapid succession, then silence. Sophia startled awake, her cries piercing the sudden quiet. I clutched her to my chest, backing against the far wall, eyes fixed on the door. It burst open, revealing not Anton or Carlo, but a face I hadn't seen in nearly a year. Marco. He looked different. Thinner, harder, with a new scar bisecting his left eyebrow. His eyes widened at the sight of Sophia, a flicker of something like regret crossing his features before disappearing behind a mask of urgency. We need to go. Now, he said, reaching for my arm. I recoiled instinctively. Don't touch me. Frustration crossed his face. Elena, there's no time. They weren't taking you to a safe house. They were delivering you to the Varga family. Dante's rivals. He's been compromised. Why should I believe you? I demanded, even as doubt crept in. You abandoned us. To protect you, he insisted, glancing nervously toward the door. I stole from Dante, yes, but when I realized he'd never stop hunting me, I tried to make a deal. Use his name on the birth certificate. Make him think he could use you to get to me. His expression hardened. I never thought he'd actually claim you both. Keep you. Sophia's cries grew more insistent. Outside, I heard more cars arriving. We need to leave, Marco pressed. I have a car behind the building. We can be across state lines by morning. The choice before me was impossible. Trust the man who had abandoned me, or return to those who claim to protect me but might be betraying Dante. And underneath it all, the terrifying uncertainty of whether Dante was even alive. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice barely audible over Sophia's cries. "Where's Dante?" Something like jealousy flashed across Marco's features. "Does it matter?" "He's not who you think he is, Elena." "Neither are you," I countered. "Tell me." Marco checked his watch, desperation evident in his movements. "Last I heard, he was being held at the old Montesi warehouse. The Vargas want his territory, his operations." He reached for me again. "Now please, we need to—" "No," I said, the decision crystallizing with sudden clarity. "I'm not going with you." Anger replaced urgency on his face. "Don't be stupid. They'll kill you once they realize their plan failed." "Maybe," I conceded, clutching Sophia tighter as her cries subsided into hiccuping sobs. "But I'm not running away with a man who used me as collateral, who put his name on my daughter's birth certificate without my knowledge, who abandoned us when we needed him most." I straightened my spine, finding strength I didn't know I possessed. "I'd rather face whatever comes next on my terms." For a moment, I thought he might try to force us. Then, sirens sounded in the distance, growing closer. "You're making a mistake," he said, backing toward the door. "A deadly one." "Maybe," I repeated, "but it's my mistake to make." After he disappeared, I sank down against the wall, cradling Sophia against my chest. Through the window, I watched car lights flare and fade as Marco fled. Minutes later, new vehicles arrived, black SUVs with tinted windows, familiar in their ominous uniformity. The restroom door opened again, revealing Alessandra, her immaculate appearance incongruous against the dingy surroundings. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her eyes quickly assessing us both. I shook my head. "Carlo, dead," she confirmed without emotion. "Along with Anton. They betrayed Mr. Ricci." Hope flared painfully in my chest. "Dante's alive?" Something like approval flickered in her gaze. "Yes, injured but alive." She extended her hand. "He's asking for you." I took her hand, allowing her to help me up. "Marco said the Vargas family was working with Carlo, yes. We've known of the potential infiltration for weeks." She led me out of the restroom toward one of the waiting vehicles. "It's why Mr. Ricci arranged tonight's meeting. To flush out the traitors. Using himself as bait," I said, understanding dawning with horrifying clarity. Alessandra opened the car door, her expression softening marginally. "He said you'd be angry about that part." As I settled into the back seat with Sophia, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming me, I couldn't help but ask, why didn't he tell me? Why let me believe he was walking into a trap? Alessandra's answer was simple. "Because your reaction needed to be genuine. Carlo was watching." She closed the door, ending the conversation as efficiently as she conducted everything else. As the vehicle pulled away, heading back toward the city and whatever awaited us there, I pressed my lips to Sophia's forehead and whispered a promise. "We're going home." The private hospital room was bathed in the soft glow of dawn when we arrived, the first tentative rays of sunlight filtering through half-drawn blinds. Alessandra led me through a maze of corridors, past discreet security personnel positioned at strategic intervals, their watchful eyes following our progress. "He's been asking for you," she said, pausing outside a door guarded by two of Dante's most trusted men. "The doctors have him sedated, but he's been fighting it." A hint of something almost like affection colored her typically neutral tone. Stubborn man. My heart hammered against my ribs as the door opened. Sophia had fallen asleep during the drive, her tiny body warm and heavy against my shoulder. I stepped into the room, breath catching at the sight before me. Dante lay in the hospital bed, his powerful frame somehow diminished against the white sheets. Monitors beeped steadily beside him, tracking vitals with cold precision. A bandage covered his left shoulder, spots of crimson seeping through the pristine white. Another wrapped around his ribs, visible beneath the thin hospital gown. His face bore a deep cut above his right eye, butterfly stitches holding the edges together. But he was alive, breathing, present. His eyes opened as I approached, recognition and relief washing over his features. "Elena," he murmured, voice rough from intubation or disuse. His gaze moved to Sophia, softening instantly. You're both safe. The simple statement broke something inside me. Tears I'd been holding back for hours spilled over, streaming silently down my cheeks. You almost weren't, I said, unable to keep the accusation from my voice. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. But I am. You should have told me, I insisted, moving closer to the bed. About Carlo, about the trap you were setting. Would you have let me go if you'd known? He asked, eyes never leaving mine, the truth caught in my throat. No. Exactly. He shifted slightly, wincing at the movement. And I needed to end this, for all of us. Sophia stirred against me, her tiny face scrunching with displeasure at being confined too long. Without thinking, I gently transferred her to the crook of Dante's uninjured arm. He accepted her with that now familiar expertise, his large hand cradling her head with infinite care. You met Marco, he said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. I nodded. Perching carefully on the edge of the bed, he tried to convince me to leave with him. Something dangerous flashed in Dante's eyes. And yet you're here. I'm here, I confirmed softly. I chose you. The simplicity of the statement hung between us, weighted with all it left unsaid. Dante's free hand found mine, fingers intertwining with surprising gentleness. Why? He asked, vulnerability momentarily visible beneath his carefully constructed armor. I considered deflecting, offering some practical explanation about safety or security. Instead, I chose truth. Because in the moment I thought I might lose you, I realized I didn't want to live in a world where you didn't exist. The admission cost me, exposing a heart I'd guarded carefully since Marco's betrayal. Because somewhere between being your captive and being your whatever I am now, I started to care for you, more than I should. His fingers tightened around mine. And what do you think you are to me, Elena? I don't know, I admitted. Your responsibility, your protection detail, the mother of a child you've claimed as yours? Mine, he said simply. Just mine. In every way that matters. His gaze dropped to Sophia, sleeping peacefully against him. Both of you. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it wrapped around me like a shield, offering the protection and belonging I'd craved my entire life. What happened last night? I asked, needing to understand the danger we'd faced. The danger we might still face. Dante's expression hardened. The Vargas family has been trying to expand into my territory for years. Carlo was their inside man, had been for months. He shifted Sophia more comfortably against his chest. Marco's theft was convenient timing. They used him, fed him information about my mother's ring, knowing what it meant to me. Did you get it back? I asked softly, remembering how he'd described it, the last thing his mother had given him. A genuine smile touched his lips. Yes. It was never about money for Marco, just survival. When he realized the Vargas family planned to eliminate him after using him to get to me, he made a desperate play. His eyes met mine. Using you and Sophia, by naming you as Sophia's father, I said, understanding dawning. He thought it would give him leverage. He thought it would force me to negotiate. Dante corrected. What he didn't anticipate was that I would claim you both completely. His thumb stroked over my knuckles. Or that I would find something I never knew I wanted. Sophia made a small sound in her sleep, her tiny fingers curling against Dante's hospital gown. The sight of them together, this powerful, dangerous man holding my daughter with such tenderness, made my heart constrict painfully. What happens now? I asked, the question encompassing so much more than just our immediate future. Now, Dante said, his voice gaining strength. We end this properly. He met my gaze directly. The Vargas family has been dealt with. Their key players are either dead or have pledged loyalty to me. Marco has been given two choices: disappear permanently with enough resources to start over, or suffer the consequences of his betrayal. And us? I pressed, needing clarity after so much uncertainty. That depends on you. His expression turned serious. I made you a promise, Elena. Freedom, if you wanted it, a choice. His fingers tightened around mine. That promise still stands, though I'll admit the prospect of watching you walk away has become unthinkable. The raw honesty in his voice stripped away my remaining defenses. I don't want to leave, I whispered, the admission both terrifying and liberating. But I can't live in a cage either, no matter how gilded. Not a cage, he countered. A home, a family. His eyes searched mine. A partnership, if you'll have it. Partnership? I repeated, skepticism coloring my tone. You're not exactly known for sharing power, Dante. A genuine laugh escaped him, followed immediately by a wince as it pulled at his injured ribs. Perhaps not in business, but in this, with you, I'm willing to learn. His expression sobered. I want you by my side, Elena. Not behind me, not beneath me, beside me. The promise in those words, the future they offered, made my breath catch. And Sophia? His gaze dropped to the sleeping infant. I've already filed the paperwork to legally adopt her if you consent. She would be a Ricci in name and in protection. He looked up, vulnerability flashing briefly in his dark eyes. I would be her father in every way that matters. She's not your blood, I said, testing him, needing to be certain. Blood is overrated, he replied without hesitation. Family is about choice, about protection, about love. The last word hung between us, charged with meaning. I choose her. I choose you. The rest is just details. Tears blurred my vision again. When did the terrifying Mafia boss become a philosopher? His lips curved into that rare, genuine smile that transformed his features. When a stubborn, brave woman crashed into my life with a newborn daughter and refused to be intimidated. His hand left mine to brush a tear from my cheek. You changed everything, Elena, from the moment I saw you in that hospital bed, defiant despite your vulnerability. I was terrified, I admitted. I know, but you faced me anyway. Pride colored his voice. That's when I knew you were extraordinary. Sophia stirred again, her eyes fluttering open. She yawned, tiny fists stretching above her head before settling back against Dante's chest, apparently content with her new pillow. She trusts you, I observed softly. Children have excellent instincts, he replied, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Something we often lose as adults. I thought of Marco, how I'd ignored every warning sign, blinded by loneliness and his superficial charm. Then I thought of Dante, how despite the circumstances that brought us together, despite his dangerous world and controlling tendencies, I'd never truly feared him. Not for myself, not for Sophia. What are you thinking? Dante asked, watching me with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see through every defense. That maybe it's time I trusted my instincts too, I answered honestly. His expression softened. And what are they telling you? I leaned forward, careful of his injuries, and pressed my lips to his in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened into something more profound. His hand came up to cradle the back of my neck, holding me to him with a tenderness that belied his strength. When we parted, both slightly breathless, I rested my forehead against his. They're telling me I'm already home. 3 months later, I stood in the garden of what was now truly our home, watching as autumn painted the leaves in fiery hues of gold and crimson. Sophia, growing stronger and more curious by the day, lay on a blanket beneath a maple tree, protected from the gentle breeze by the cashmere blanket Dante had insisted on buying her. Contemplating the universe, his voice came from behind me, arms wrapping around my waist as he pressed a kiss to the curve of my neck. I leaned back against him, savoring his warmth and strength. Just thinking about how much has changed. His hand splayed possessively across my stomach. Any regrets? I turned in his embrace, looking up into the face that had become my entire world. Not one. The dangerous man who had claimed us now wore his power differently around us, like a shield rather than a weapon. The world outside our gates still knew him as Dante Ricci, the formidable head of a criminal empire. But within these walls, he was simply ours. Sophia's adoring father, my passionate partner. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. Something I've been waiting to give you. He opened his palm, revealing a ring, platinum band with a single flawless diamond, elegant in its simplicity. "This isn't my mother's ring," he said, anticipating my question. "That belongs to Sophia now, for when she's older. This one is new, for you alone." My heart stuttered as he took my left hand. "Dante, I'm not asking for traditional vows or a conventional arrangement," he continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "Our beginning was too unusual for that. But I am asking for forever, Elena. On our terms." I looked past him to Sophia, contentedly batting at the mobile Dante had hung above her favorite outdoor spot. Then back to this man who had entered our lives like a storm and become our shelter. "Yes," I said simply, watching as he slid the ring onto my finger. "Perfect fit, of course." Dante left nothing to chance. Later that evening, as we lay tangled in sheets still warm from our lovemaking, Sophia sleeping peacefully in her nursery across the hall, Dante traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. "You never asked what happened to Marco," he observed, his tone carefully neutral. I shifted to look at him in the moonlight filtering through our windows. "I assumed you kept your word, gave him the resources to disappear." Dante's expression revealed nothing. "I did, after ensuring he understood the consequences of ever attempting to contact you or Sophia again. I didn't ask for details. Some aspects of Dante's world remained separate from our life together, a boundary we both maintained for the health of our unconventional family." "He's Sophia's biological father," I acknowledged quietly. "But he's not her dad." My hand found Dante's in the darkness. "You are, in every way that matters." His arms tightened around me, pulling me flush against the solid warmth of his body. "I protect what's mine," he murmured against my hair, repeating the words he'd spoken to me that first day in the hospital. "Always," I finished for him, understanding now that what had once sounded like a threat had always been a promise. Outside our window, the autumn wind rustled through leaves soon to fall. Within our walls, a family forged in unusual circumstances had found its own perfect balance of power and tenderness, protection and freedom, passion and peace. Not a fairy tale ending, perhaps, but ours. Completely, irrevocably ours.